because we were part of the UDF, we had to, as civics, adopt positions and so on various things. And because I was the organiser, that was part of my job, getting these things done. So I remember, this isn't so much a story about the civics per se, but organising at the time and how different places had different resources. In a town like Montague, there was an organisation called MAG, Montague Aksiegemeenskap, or I'm not sure what the A was for, but they were like, I suppose, the advice office. I learnt more from the women that were running the advice offices, like Auntie Vivi in Belleville. There were people like Mildred Ventura in Elsace that, I mean, she was a teacher and she'd come home and then be listening to people's problems. And we had a National Civics Conference in 1990, I think it was, I promise you, if it weren't for those aunties, they're not that much older than me, but, you know, they were a little bit my senior in experience. And the way they just made, like cooking for 300 people, just become, where the money came from for that, how it happened, and just the ease with which it happened. You know, I get the call to say we must try and have this conference. I go and speak to UWC, couldn't assist at the time, but Pentec could with space. But you don't know where people are going to stay, so you phone around to try and get hotels or church places and so on, and you can't still get space for everybody. And, you know, people take people into their homes, and then there's a little bit of discomfort because you haven't realized the wide spread of ages that you must. So old people don't want to be staying with like lighties, in their opinion, and so on. And being relatively young myself at the time, sometimes I have to confess that I wasn't always attentive to all of those issues. You know, I think the older me would have not been as impatient with people as I was in my youth. And yet you think you're the most, like you're taking all of the issues into account, and you don't realize what difficulties people, for example, coming from an area like Transkei have just to get out of the area and to come back in and so on. So there were a lot of things that, I mean, in retrospect, could have been done better, but what certainly did happen is that we created a civic movement that was not only a civic movement along racial lines or only in one geography. We tried to cover as many geographies as we could together and so on. So, yeah. So this is a personal recollection, although it's a major issue. On the day that my husband played his first, he wasn't my husband then, but he played his first non-racial cricket match. It was at UCT's grounds. He'd asked me to just come and watch him, and Wolfie Kodesh, and was a great cricket fan and so on. So I went there, and I was a little bit nervous because all these, his teammates were friends of my family, and they all knew my family, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to get into trouble here. But I went, and in between all my other meetings, I went there, and walked me onto the field and proposed to me. And then I had to rush off to another meeting. But the meeting I had to rush off to was the taxi was between Kadeta and Carter, and it was being held at Bishop's Court at the Archbishop's residence. The meeting time had been set for 3:00. one lot of people arrived at 3 o'clock. We'd been there slightly earlier. And I won't mention who came first and who came second, but the next taxi organisation came, and they wouldn't come in because the people who had arrived first were allowed in first. So that night, they insisted they wanted to still meet, but not at the same place. So we had to, I don't know if it was Cheryl Carolus or who it was, but somebody booked a venue at the Holiday Inn in Woodstock so that the people could meet there. And I wasn't seriously enough, significant enough to the actual detail of the meeting. But we were told whoever was at that meeting, you must be at the second meeting. So even though this was supposed to be my engagement evening, I ended up in a meeting on taxis, on taxis. So there were little things like that interfered with one's normal life. But I think the period that we lived through was a period that you learnt so much from every day.